Welcome to Whispers of Al-Andalus. Tonight, let us take you back in time. To a land of knowledge, peace, and forgotten beauty. Close your eyes. Breathe deeply. And drift gently into the heart of history. This is not just a story. This is a journey, through time, through spirit, through silence. Let the past whisper you to sleep. A forgotten land in the west far across the sea, past the shores of modern Spain and the deserts of North Africa, there lies a memory hidden beneath time. This memory is not found in textbooks or loud museums. It sleeps gently under the soil, in the spaces between stones, in the patterns of old tiles, and in the fragrance of forgotten gardens. This place, once known as Al-Andalus, is not just a name. It is a whisper, a breath, a story waiting to be told again. Its winds still carry the scent of jasmine. Its rivers still know the rhythm of ancient prayers. Its trees, older than many nations, still offer shade to those who pause to remember. Once upon a time, Al-Andalus was a land where day and night danced together in balance. It was not a kingdom made only by kings, but by thinkers, artists, farmers, teachers, and dreamers. They did not all speak the same language, but they shared something greater, a love for harmony, knowledge, and peace. Imagine walking through one of its cities. The streets are narrow, lined with white walls that reflect the golden sun. Above, wooden balconies overflow with flowers. The air is warm, soft, almost like a lullaby. You hear the distant sound of water flowing from a fountain, and the slow, melodic echo of a flute playing in the distance. It is the year 950. You are in Córdoba, the jewel of Al-Andalus. At this time, Córdoba is one of the most advanced cities in the world. It has clean streets, public baths, hospitals, and more than 70 libraries. People from distant lands travel here just to learn, to discuss, to read. At the heart of the city stands a great mosque, its arches like waves of stone. When you enter, the world outside fades away. The scent of ink and leather-bound books, the soft footsteps on polished marble, and the calm recitation of verses from the Quran, all of it slows your heart, as if even time itself has paused to reflect. Outside, under the shade of palm trees, scholars sit in quiet circles. Some study astronomy, mapping the stars above them. Others study medicine, experimenting with herbs and writing their findings in long scrolls. And there are poets too, writing lines of love, loss, and longing, their voices softer than the breeze. But it was not always like this. Long before this golden age, the land had seen darkness. Civilizations had risen and fallen. Empires had come and gone. When the Muslims first arrived in 711 under the leadership of Tariq ibn Ziyad, they found a land wounded by war and greed. But they brought with them not only swords, they brought schools, architects, engineers, translators, and scribes. They built cities, not only for defense, but for life. They repaired roads, planted gardens, opened libraries. And slowly, with each candle lit, with each student taught, the darkness began to fade. The people of Al-Andalus understood something deep, that knowledge is light, and light must be shared. So they translated Greek and Roman texts into Arabic, preserving the arrival of light. When light crosses the sea, it does not shout. It simply arrives and changes everything. The year was 711 CE. The wind across the Strait of Gibraltar carried something more than salt and mist that spring. It carried a change, not loud, not forceful, but persistent, like dawn pressing against the dark. From the southern shores of North Africa, a Berber general named Tariq ibn Ziyad stood before his men, gazing at the distant coastline of Iberia. The sea glistened like silver, and behind it lay a land of uncertainty, war, and forgotten wisdom. Tariq was not a conqueror in the traditional sense. He had not crossed the sea in search of gold or thrones, but with a mission, to offer justice where there was oppression, knowledge where there was ignorance, and peace where there was fear. As he stepped onto the Iberian shore, he reportedly gave a speech, one that echoed not with the hunger of empire, but with the call of purpose. "Behind you is the sea," he said to his soldiers. "In front of you is the enemy. There is no return but in victory. And victory is in justice. The people of Iberia had been weary. Years of internal conflict among the Visigoth rulers had left the land divided and broken. The farmers were poor, the cities unstable, and the leaders often cruel. When Tariq's men entered, they did not pillage or destroy. They offered safety to those who accepted peace, and they rebuilt what had been neglected. The arrival of Muslims into the Iberian Peninsula was not met with fire and blood, as so many tales of war suggest. It was slower, more like rain than thunder. Town by town, city by city, agreements were made. Some Christian leaders willingly surrendered in exchange for protection. Others joined hands in rebuilding what their own conflicts had broken. Soon, a new society began to rise, not from ashes, but from living soil. It was a society shaped by Islamic principles: justice, mercy, knowledge, and order. The newcomers brought with them a system of law that respected the rights of all, including Christians and Jews. They introduced new farming techniques, water management systems, and trade routes that connected distant parts of the world. Within a few decades, the entire southern part of the Iberian Peninsula, now called Al-Andalus, had transformed. And yet, this was not a land of only Arabs or Berbers. It became a melting pot, where cultures met and mixed. Latin-speaking Christians, Arabic-speaking Muslims, and Hebrew-speaking Jews all walked the same streets, drank from the same fountains, and bought bread from the same markets. At the heart of this social fabric was a deep respect for learning. In the early 8th century, Al-Andalus saw the opening of madrasas, schools where students learned to read, write, calculate, and ponder. They studied not only the Quran, but logic, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. Scrolls were brought from Baghdad, Cairo, Damascus, and even translated texts from ancient Greece and Rome found new homes in the libraries of Al-Andalus. Imagine a classroom beneath the shade of a fig tree. The teacher sits on a mat, his students gathered around, reciting texts and asking questions. There are no desks or uniforms, only minds open like the sky above. The teacher pauses, letting silence fall, and then asks, "What is the purpose of knowledge?" A student answers, "To serve truth." Another, "To serve creation." The teacher smiles. "And to serve the soul." This was the spirit of early Al-Andalus. The city of Toledo quickly became a center for learning. Muslim scholars preserved and translated ancient knowledge, while Christian monks traveled from the north to read works they could not find anywhere else. The seeds of Europe's future Renaissance were quietly being planted in the soil of Andalusian libraries. But knowledge was not kept in towers or hidden behind walls. It was in the streets, in the conversations of traders, in the tools of farmers, in the songs of poets. A woman in a village could recite poetry about the stars while tending her garden. A baker might hum verses from the Quran while kneading dough. Children played with toys carved from olive wood, then returned home to recite stories of prophets and kings. Everything in life, from the sacred to the simple, was touched by learning. And it was not just intellectual learning. It was spiritual refinement. People were taught to clean before prayer, to eat with humility, to care for neighbors, to visit the sick, to give charity, to forgive. These small actions, repeated day by day, became the foundation of a moral society. In every village, the adhan, the call to prayer, echoed 5 times a day. It did not disturb, it soothed. It reminded people to pause, breathe, and remember their place in the world, neither too great nor too small. The light that came with Tariq's crossing was not only the light of military success. It was the light of civilization, slow, steady, soft, and sacred. Even in the architectural choices, this light was visible. Homes were built with inner courtyards, shaded by trees, surrounded by water. The design reflected both modesty and peace. Mosques were built with open spaces, so that sunlight could filter through at dawn and dusk. Libraries were built with wide windows, letting nature and learning live together. This harmony, between faith and reason, between man and earth, between people of different backgrounds, became the defining trait of Al-Andalus. And yet, like all golden ages, it began quietly. Not with drums, but with footsteps. Not with banners, but with pages turning. Not with conquest, but with calm. The people of Al-Andalus had been given a choice, to continue the cycles of power and pride, or to build a new way, a way of light. They chose light. And in doing so, they did something that even time has not forgotten. They created a land where difference was not feared, where learning was not rare, and where the soul was not ignored. That land still whispers in the wind. And tonight, as you rest your head and close your eyes, you may feel it, the quiet arrival of light, crossing a sea, and settling gently in your heart. The city of Córdoba. There are cities that rise and fall with armies, and there are cities that rise with books and dreams. Córdoba was the latter. As the morning sun lifted above the horizon, its golden rays washed gently over the rooftops of Córdoba. Birds sang among orange blossoms, and soft bells chimed from distant towers. The city was waking not with haste, but with harmony. Córdoba was not just a city, it was a heartbeat. In the 10th century, it was one of the most populated and advanced cities in the world. With nearly 500,000 residents, Córdoba stood proudly alongside the likes of Baghdad and Constantinople. But what made it remarkable was not its size, it was its soul. The city had over 70 libraries, 300 public baths, miles of paved roads, and thousands of lanterns that lit the streets at night. In an age when many European towns were covered in mud and shadow, Córdoba glowed like a lantern of civilization. At its center stood the jewel of the city. The Mezquita, or the Great Mosque of Córdoba. It was not merely a building. It was a poem in stone. Its red and white horseshoe arches stretched in endless rows, drawing the eyes upward, lifting thoughts beyond the self. The air inside was cool, carrying the scent of ancient wood and quiet reflection. Light filtered through high windows, dancing softly on the marble floor, as if the mosque itself breathed in stillness. Each morning, before the city fully awoke, the call to prayer rose gently from its minaret. It was not a command, but an invitation, to pause, to remember, to begin the day with purpose. In the narrow streets around the mosque, life unfolded slowly. Market stalls opened, children hurried to school with slates under their arms, scholars in robes walked with scrolls tucked beneath their sleeves. A potter shaped clay in his courtyard. A teacher recited Arabic grammar beneath a fig tree. A baker prepared bread before the heat of the day. Córdoba was a place where the mind and heart walked side by side. At the heart of its greatness stood a man, Caliph Abd al-Rahman III. Under his leadership, Córdoba became a beacon of learning and diplomacy. He invited thinkers, poets, translators, doctors, architects, and craftsmen to build not just buildings, but legacy. He built Madinat al-Zahra, a shining city just outside Córdoba, filled with gardens, fountains, and halls where ideas blossomed like spring. In the great library of Córdoba, there were over 400,000 manuscripts. Some of them were copies of Greek and Roman works that had been lost in Europe for centuries. Others were original writings in Arabic, Hebrew, and Latin, discussing mathematics, medicine, ethics, and theology. But knowledge was not kept in ivory towers. Students came from humble families. Teachers were respected not for their power, but their patience. In Córdoba, a scholar was admired more than a soldier. A poet more than a politician. And yet, Córdoba was not perfect. There were debates. Disagreements. Difficult seasons. But in those moments, people returned to principles, justice, mercy, and the belief that learning was a sacred act. Even the layout of the city reflected this balance. Streets were built to curve, not straight, so that no path would lead too fast to pride. Homes were designed with inner courtyards, so that peace began not outside, but inside. Water flowed through channels and pools, reflecting the sky, a reminder that clarity begins with stillness. On quiet evenings, families would sit together under olive trees. Elders told stories of the prophet, of the wise men of the East, and of the righteous rulers who chose humility over pride. Children listened with wide eyes, wrapped in blankets, sipping warm milk. Sometimes, a musician would play a gentle tune on the oud or ney. Not to perform, but to calm. The music was slow, soft, almost like a whisper of the past echoing into the present. And when night fell, Cordoba did not sleep in fear. It slept in prayer. Lanterns flickered in doorways. The moonlight painted silver shadows. In the mosques, a few stayed to read. In homes, final whispers of gratitude floated upward before dreams took hold. The stars above Cordoba shone the same as they do now. But then, they seemed closer, as if leaning in to listen. Cordoba taught the world something we are still trying to remember. That a city is not made by its walls, but by its wisdom. That progress is not in gold, but in goodness. That when people are allowed to think, to question, to create, they build not only cities, but civilizations. So tonight, as your eyes grow heavy, imagine walking those peaceful streets. Feel the stone beneath your feet. Smell the bread in the air. Hear the rustle of parchment, the flow of water, the hush of prayer. You are in Cordoba. And Cordoba lives in you. The Garden of Minds. 2000 Sozli Sokan Hikoya, Ukslab Kolashukan Mos, Islami Dinga Zid Amas. In some places, flowers bloom. In Al-Andalus, minds bloomed. Far from the markets and the minarets, beyond the rivers and walls of the city, there was a place where silence was a teacher. It was not a palace. It had no throne. It was a garden of minds. This was the intellectual heart of Al-Andalus, its schools, its circles of learning, its quiet courtyards where thoughts grew like vines under the sun. Here, people gathered not to conquer or command, but to learn, to reflect, and to seek understanding. They came from every walk of life: tailors, shepherds, judges, children. Some were Muslims, some were Christians, others were Jews, but all were seekers of light. In the mornings, the scent of orange blossoms floated on the breeze. Birds sang softly, and students arrived with satchels filled with ink, parchment, and questions. They sat on woven mats. They removed their sandals. And they listened. The teacher would not raise his voice. He did not shout. He spoke slowly, with eyes that had seen many moons. His words were like ripples in water, soft, but lasting. Knowledge, he said, is like rain. It does not choose where to fall. But only fertile hearts can grow from it. Under the shade of pomegranate trees, they studied philosophy, mathematics, medicine, poetry, astronomy, and theology. They asked deep questions, not just how, but why. Why does the heart long for beauty? Why does the moon follow its path so faithfully? What is justice? What is the soul? No answer was final. Every answer led to more questions. This was not a place of blind obedience, it was a garden of curiosity. One young girl asked, "Why do stars move but never fall?" An old scholar smiled, "Perhaps they are like wise people, shining quietly, never needing applause." Another boy wondered, "Why does Allah create so many different people?" The teacher placed his hand on the boy's shoulder and whispered, "Because harmony is not made from one note, but from many." They wrote with reed pens on parchment. They copied ancient texts. They translated the words of Plato, Aristotle, Galen, and Euclid. But they did not copy blindly, they questioned, corrected, and sometimes even improved. Al-Andalus became the bridge, a bridge between East and West, between old and new, between body and soul. In this garden Averroes ibn Rushd taught logic and law. Maimonides ibn Maimun wrote books on medicine that would later guide Europe. Al-Zarawi, a surgeon from Cordoba, created medical tools still used today. Ibn Hazm, the philosopher, wrote a book on love so deep, even poets of later ages would quote him. But beyond the famous names, there were thousands of quiet minds, women who taught their children ethics, men who copied texts by candlelight, merchants who shared scientific ideas on their travels. They did not do this for fame. They did it because to learn was to worship. In Islam, seeking knowledge is an act of devotion. And in Al-Andalus, this devotion was everywhere, in the ink stains on fingers, in the careful folds of manuscripts, in the silent nods between teacher and student. They believed that learning cleanses the soul. Just as water purifies the body, knowledge purifies the heart. And so, they studied not to become powerful, but to become useful, gentle, just. Even the architecture of their schools reflected this philosophy. Doors were carved with verses about wisdom. Windows let in soft light. Walls were decorated not with gold, but with calligraphy, flowing lines of Arabic, reminding students to be humble, patient, and curious. In the evenings, when classes ended, students often remained. They discussed ideas under lantern light. Some wrote poetry. Others stared at the stars, drawing charts of constellations with trembling fingers. The night did not frighten them. It inspired them. One student once wrote, "The night is not the absence of light. It is the time when inner light begins to shine." And as the moon rose above the city, casting shadows across books and benches, the Garden of Minds never truly slept. It dreamed. It dreamed of better days. Of wiser people. Of kinder leaders. It dreamed of peace, not the silence of fear, but the harmony of understanding. Many of those students would grow up to teach others. Some would travel. Others would stay. But they all carried the same light, the light that began in that garden. And now, centuries later, that light still exists. In libraries. In classrooms. In quiet questions whispered into the dark. And in you. Tonight, as your breath slows and your thoughts begin to float, imagine yourself sitting beneath a tree in that garden. The leaves rustle gently. A book rests in your lap. A teacher sits nearby, smiling. You are safe. You are learning. You are not alone. Welcome to the Garden of Minds. You have traveled far tonight. Through cities of gold, gardens of minds, and stars of wisdom. Let your soul rest in the quiet warmth of history. May peace be upon your night. And light upon your dreams. Until next time. Sleep well.